Hey everybody, Dean Lloyd here again from Lloyd Consulting Co. Excited to launch the first episode of I've Invited You On Because. And my first guest is Natalie Chiappanzzo. Hopefully I was hopefully I've said that correctly. We've just practiced and rehearsed it a few times. Um, Natalie, I've invited you on because we met on LinkedIn. We comment on each other's stuff, but I really value and admire the work you've done, especially in the youth space. Can you just explain a bit about yourself and the work that you do for the listeners, please?
Cool. Thank you. And thank you for having me. And being the first guest is a bit of a privilege. Yes, you got my name right. My name is Natalie Chiappanzzo. I've worked in the youth sector for the last 18 years now. So spent most of my time out in Western Sydney, predominantly in Blacktown, managing a small community grassroots organisation out there. And I guess a lot of my work has really been in the last kind of 10 years around that youth-led, co-led design. And I'm super passionate about that grassroots approach and really starting to bring things back down to community, and having community-led solutions and, looking outside the current system and the failures of the current system, and how we can empower young people and work alongside young people and share that practice. So I've done that for the last 18 years, and I've just recently launched my own collaboration business, I would say. I don't want to say consultancy because there's a bit of, you're a big person around language as well. I'm now working in a space where I want to collaborate with other people and young people and like-minded people who are also passionate about social impact for young people. So that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. Thank you for that spiel on what you're doing and how you're doing it. And I think that's really what led me to want to invite you on and have this conversation is the co-design, co-production. I feel like you're really in this space. You are a leader in this space around, including the youth to be part of the solution to the problem. And I look, I'm a privileged white guy. I'm not going to shy away from that. I never do. Blacktown, is foreign to me. I'm a white suburban kid. However, I understand the issues and I've heard of the issues. And I'm, mainly because I have children that are sort of being caught up in that youth space. So I don't really want to work in it. I don't want to do it at home and at work. Um, but I really value, and what I try to get at is, how the youth, criminal justice, prison population, whatever, is essentially 1,000 per capita, maybe a little bit more per day, per evening, turns into 45,000. Like, so the early intervention, and that's what it's about. So can you just talk us through some of the co stuff that you're doing and how you're doing it and what that looks like?
Yeah, so I think my experience is quite unique in the sense that I've spent 18 years in frontline service delivery, which not many people do, right? So I really had the privilege of being in a space and a physical space that was open to all young people. So the culture that we cultivated within that space was really about the door is always open no matter what. So no matter who you are, no matter where you've come from, no matter where you're going, you're able to come into this space. Now, that can be quite contradictory to, certain ways of working where you have these funding, agreements that, you need to be doing X, Y, and Z, and you need to be operating in certain ways. And, that's always been something that's frustrated me from very early on around why are we ticking boxes? And I think being face to face with young people every single day, we used to call it ground zero because that moment that young person was experiencing a crisis, they were on the doorstep. And so we were faced with, what was going on in that moment. And in those moments, you see that stark reality where what you're being funded to do or what's actually happening or the systems and services that are out there are actually not meeting the needs of any of our young people. And so we see that across the sector. We see, billions of dollars being invested into certain programs or organizations, but we still have the same social problems. So, for me, it was really about this critical thinking piece around, are we really doing early intervention? So one piece of, part of that co-design is the early intervention, right? So we talk about early intervention, plenty of research, plenty of reports, everyone talks about it. But my, frustration or my argument is, are we really doing early intervention? So we know that, certain government funding that targets early intervention and prevention has shifted now to focus on like the 0 to 5s, because we need to invest really early on, which, yes, we do. We need to invest there. My argument is, you're not actually working with the 0 to 5-year-old, you're working with the parents, right? So trying to change, trying to change what's happening within that family and trying to then put in mechanisms to prevent something is kind of a little bit too late. So for me, I think that working with young people who you kind of have this opportunity, yes, they may have experienced disadvantage or trauma or poverty, whatever they've gone through, but you have a really unique opportunity to change the trajectory of their life. You can intervene with a young person. So that's really where my passion came from, because I was seeing these young people coming in, and in that moment, if that service wasn't there, if that door wasn't open, they were going to end up homeless. They were going to end up in the justice system. They were going to end up in that child protection system, which made me realize this is the moment of intervention that needs to happen. But that could only happen when you're doing it in a way that is flexible for young people. So again, I learned, many years ago, probably about 10 or 12 years ago, around co-designing with young people. And, that wasn't a buzzword back then, but it
No.
was something that I kind of stumbled across and in a sense. So the reason that I stumbled across it was there was an incident that happened in Doonside many, many years ago, where there was an alleged rape of a Pacific Islander young person by a group of African young males. And so it kind of blew up in the media. Everyone freaked out. Oh, there's going to be racial tensions in Blacktown. And, so I had a group of young people at the space that were just like, this is like out of control. This is not what's happening. We're being vilified. We're being criminalized. The narrative that was being generated about, racial tensions and things like that. And so they came to me, and then at the same time I had the media and government calling me going, what's going on? Is there going to be racial wars in Blacktown? And I was like, you know what? And exactly what you said, like, I am not the person to be speaking on this. Like, I'm not that demographic to actually have a voice. So why don't you just come here and speak to the young people directly? And the first time ever, I actually had government come out and speak face to face with young people. And when I say young people, it's the young people that are involved in these instances, right? It's not your well-polished, highly engaged, well-spoken young person that's advocating on behalf of a group of young people. It's the young people that are actually involved. And so through that, we managed to get a grant. We ran a program. Program was great, and it finished. And then maybe about 4 years later, and the program was around getting young people to lead that process, right? Because I was like, well, the solution, so you guys can lead it, and I'll just support and make sure that everything's being run in the back end. And then maybe about 4 years later, one of the young people who were a leader in that program said to me, that program changed my life. And I was like, oh, really? Like, out of all the things that we've done, that changed your life? And he said, yeah, because I was just involved in this really, I was involved in crime. I was in a really bad place, and I wasn't doing anything good with my life. But you saw me as a leader, gave me a leadership position. And then all of a sudden, all the other young people were looking up at me. And I realized that I had to step into that role. And so the penny kind of dropped for me, where I was like, that's it. That's the answer, right? Is that you can't be what you can't see. So that was probably, like 10, 12 years ago that we started this whole, well, let's just let young people lead.
Yeah.
Let's let them take the reins. And so that's how that process kind of started for me.
Yeah, cool. And I have a good friend that he says those closest to the problem are closest to the solution, yet more often furthest from the resources and the funding to do anything about it. So it's such a true statement. I got a bit teary when you were talking about that guy or the person that said, "Hey, you've changed my life," because I've witnessed stuff like that happen, and I've been involved in stuff like that happening, and just I think where I sit and where we align, I think, is the punitive model that we have. Like, that people, like, justice is the most palatable word we have for revenge, and people seek justice. However, like, when it comes to kids need love, care, and kindness. They don't need to be punished to be taught a lesson. So just how backwards we have that still today. And if you look at Queensland and what I can't even comprehend what they're doing up there at the moment. But and that media rhetoric that's feeding that still, and that's why I said, like, 12 years ago you're doing it, and people still haven't, there's certain people in spaces that are doing it and have cottoned onto it now. But it's such important work. And one of the things that I always try to translate to the people that I'm working with is, hey, for argument's sake, if you've bought an ounce of pot or a quarter of pot and you've turned it into an ounce of pot, or you've done whatever it is in those, or you've got a group of guys and you're leading them and they're going and running around and doing stuff for you, like their leadership qualities, you just need to understand how to harness them. Yeah. Do you see
Absolutely. So,
in
yeah,
your space?
yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
don't
So
word
one of
it
the things
how
that
I do, but
yeah. So how I would explain is that we take their street and their survival skills and we turn them into life skills, because exactly what you said, we're quick to just punish and we're quick to write young people off and we're quick to point out all the things that they're not doing right. But if you actually look at that from a different lens and you look at it from a strengths-based approach and go, well, what actually are the strengths of this young person? Like to be doing some of the things that they're doing, they're very, very smart. They're very organized. They've got time
entrepreneurs.
management skills. Yeah, they're running businesses. Okay, you're running something that's really illegal. We're not condoning that. I'm not encouraging that.
Yeah.
But it's actually just approaching the young person from that strengths-based approach, which again, I don't feel like we do a lot. We kind of come in and we come in and it's the
Nudge them
welfare
here
model,
and
right?
there,
Let's
don't
just
you?
come in and we'll save the day and we'll tell you what you need
Yeah.
to do and how you need to do it. And that's kind of the narrative with young people. But
Yeah.
definitely in the justice space, or the lack of justice, in terms of young people, um, I think that we fail again, like what you said around those closest to the problem, also closest to the solution, is so true. And when you speak, and for me, like, again, I have this very unique perspective, because imagine sitting for 18 years every single day with the
Horrible.
most at risk and disconnected young people. You hear and you see everything,
Yeah.
but it gives you a perspective of understanding to go, what has happened to this young person? Why are they doing this? As opposed to let's punish them for what they've done. And so I always look at, when we talk about language, and words are super important, right? So what do we call these young people? They're complex. They're complex young
Yeah.
people.
Hard
For me,
to
I'm like, yeah, hard to read.
They're just
Yeah,
over
they're
there.
hard to read. They're sitting right there.
Have you gone and spoken to
But
them? No.
yeah. But, are they complex, or are they just a manifestation of the experiences and the trauma that they've endured? Are
Or
they
are they
just
just
behaving in a
different
way?
to what you are? Like it's just different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, like what really, what do you expect from that young person after everything that they've endured and the life
Yeah.
that they've gone through at such a young age? Some of these young people, their stories are just unfathomable, when you're hearing it. And I
Yeah, I
feel
know.
like not enough people hear that. And so that's why these decisions get made, because we talk about young people in numbers, the human services industry that forgets that we're talking about humans. We want
Inhumane
to
service.
quantify. Yeah. We want to quantify, we want numbers, right? Because that's how the system's designed.
Yeah.
But for me, the numbers, I can tell you, cool, yeah, we had 3,500 young people come through the doors. But for me, those numbers have names, they have stories, they have a history, they have strengths, they have something to contribute. They're not just a number on a piece of paper.
Yeah, it's so true. Like I relate to it so much. And where I've landed, like I've recently been back from a fellowship for about a year now, but what I learned from that fellowship was people like trauma informed practices are like it's a big buzzword, and it's sort of it irks me at the minute. However, humane practices, when we treat people humanely, like as humans, we don't have criminogenic needs. We have an
Yeah.
inherent need to be treated humanely. And
Yeah.
especially as children, when we understand that, and just going back to a bit around how, you said early intervention. I wrote a program, an employment pathways program for corrective services, and pardon me, I had 80 people come through there, and 78 of those people hadn't gone past year 7 at high school.
Wow.
So when I give the information to corrective services, they're like, "Oh, we need to educate them." I was like, you sort of missed the point. Why at year 7 aren't these families being supported and resourced enough to get their kids through high school? Like that's where we need to go. Not like we don't need to wait until they get to prison to educate them. Let's
Yeah.
go into the communities, resource the communities, and build them up and give them capacity, whatever that looks like. Yeah, that's sort of that early intervention work that you think of.
Yeah. Absolutely. And exactly what you said, we wait until the crisis, right? We wait until that very pointy end, and then everyone's talking about, and across all domains, it's not just like we'll wait until a young person gets locked up. We'll wait until they're in out of home care. And then we talk about let's put more money into foster care, and let's put more money into the prison system, and let's put more money into the DV refuges. It's like none of that is early intervention. That's just working again at that pointy end. And, again, having that perspective of being on the ground and, again, being in a community for such a long period of time, it's like almost like an ethnographic research that I've done around being able to observe what happens, right, in this space. But I feel like the work to invest in communities and to have communities lead and empower communities, it takes time, because you need to build relationship, you need to build trust,
Yeah.
you need to shift the power, which I think people are just do not want to shift power. We can go back to that in terms of the co-design stuff around, is this really co-design, or are you just designing something and tacking the community at the end, So that power imbalance is a big thing in this space around, if we really want to invest in communities, you actually have to do it, and you have to do it for a long period of time. So it's not going to be done in your funding cycle. It's not going to be done in your 6-month, kind of ticker box. And we see that all the time. Like, there's a grant available at the moment, a youth-led opportunity grant where young people get to lead in their community. Amazing. This is great. Young people get to lead and design. But the reality is, if you're a group of young people and you're not connected to an organization, you can't apply for the grant. So how youth-led is this? Oh, the organization has to demonstrate that it's youth-led. They fill out a grant that goes to some arbitrary committee that goes, oh, yeah, we're deciding whether or not this meets the needs.
And their capacity to fill out a grant at some stage.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. And so then they decide whether or not that meets the needs of these young, and it's like, well, is this really youth-led? So I feel again like language, and I see a lot of your posts, you talk about this a lot around words and language and what does that mean? And even, youth-led is interesting because, for many years I talked about we need youth-led. And over the last kind of few years, I've now started to speak about co-led, because youth-led in its truest essence means that it is purely led by young people, which in some circumstances can't be done. So if you think of just organizationally, an organization that's run purely by young people, it means by the time that you turn 24, you got to exit the organization, right? So that can't necessarily work. But when I talk about youth-led, what that means is that young people have the choice and power and control over certain things, and we facilitate the conditions around that, and we empower them to have that control. But most of the time, really, it's co-led. So my practice really is 50-50, where, you bring your professional practice and you also bring young people with lived experience, but they're equal. They need to be equal. As soon as you start putting that out of balance, then you start to go, is this really working how it should be?
Yeah, and I've got a bugbear at the moment with a larger organisation in the criminal justice space that's, I would say 98% rich white men, judges, former judges, politicians that have formed this alliance that are saying, oh, we've got all this lived experience, and we're so around the co-production and they've all come up somewhat, I assume, feeling guilty because they've been slotting all these people in prison for decades and profited healthily off of it. Now they've got the largest amount of money from like this big philanthropic organization, and now they're trotting out all these lived experience people, and they're like, and I remember when I was at the start of my lived experience journey, and it was like, it feels really nice, people want me, and it's nice, and that feels good. But the true co-production and that sort of collaboration process is, there just needs to be a seat at the table. And whenever you want to come and sit down, your information has the same value as mine. And really what I'm finding now is, as I go into these spaces, and more into the academic world, when I say, oh, look, I've done far more research than any professor that you could ever wheel out in front of me. Like I've done like 25, 30 years of research. There are some people that have done that, but they're really old and rusted on to the ways that they've always thought. So that like the division is the enemy. That's how I see it at the moment. Like if we're arguing with each other and with the kids or whoever our sort of co-production is, like the other team's winning, like we're arguing. So there's been a real push for lived experience in the space and youth led and all that sort of stuff, but we can't do it on our own. Like it's pointless
No.
on our own because we need everybody to come with us, not just yeah. Is that where you're
Yeah,
at
yeah.
at the moment? Like we need everybody as a solution. And when my information has the same gravitas as your information and
Mhm.
the kid's information and the person that's still using on the streets information, like when all of our
Mhm.
information has the same gravitas, that's when that's true, whatever co-design, co-production, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, part of me like struggles with this as well because, you're asking people, it's the systems that entrench young people into this disadvantage, right? And then at the other end, you're like, and now we want you to solve it. And so now we want you to be, we want you to co-design and solve the problems that we've
I'll give you
created
some
for you.
shitty
And so,
biscuits and coffee to do it.
yeah, we'll give
And
you a
we're going to
$20
pay
gift
millions.
card like to solve this problem. And so, I mean, that part I'm still grappling with around like, because I want young people, I want them there. I want them to have their voices and to be valued in the experience, but I also understand the toll that it takes and the
Yes.
expectation and this whole notion of like, well, now you need to solve it. It's like, hang on a second, you guys created this problem. And if you want us to solve it, then actually support and resource us and pay us to solve it
Yeah.
in the capacity that we can contribute. So
Yeah.
again, that's why I talk about that 50-50, right? So I don't have the lived experience that young people have had. I haven't personally gone through that, and I will never claim that I have.
Yeah.
I have professional practice, which is important,
Yeah.
but lived experience is just as important. And if that is not equal, and that's not 50-50, it's always going to be off, right? And
Yeah.
that was a big part of the way that I work is I sit equally with young people. We all sit at the table together.
Yeah.
At this table, we're all equal. My responsibility may be different, yeah, because I have to go report to someone or I've got to, do a funding. My responsibility is different to yours, but it doesn't make me more powerful. It doesn't make me more important, and it doesn't make me more knowledgeable. And the more that we can get people to sit in that space and think like that, the more things will change. But like I said, there's a big power struggle. And I saw that in many ways. And in many ways, really shocked of like even people within the sector that you think, hang on a second, you're meant to be a youth worker. Like you're actually meant to care about these young people. Like,
Yeah.
why are you judging young people? I don't understand what's happening here. And so that's always been a struggle, like I feel like my practice approach has been built over 18 years of working directly with young people, like being in the thick of it every single day, listening to them, giving them like the resources and the support and the encouragement for them to choose and decide what it is that they want to do. That's how I've developed my practice. And I know that it works. I've seen it work, right? But then trying to convince other people to work like that, it's really, really difficult because we're stuck in these systems and structures. They're bureaucratic obstructions. I've heard that word before. They're just these obstructions to be able to do anything. And I reflect there was a time where in the organization, we didn't have any funding for a period of time.
Wow.
And so in that period of time, literally I was just doing whatever the young people wanted, right? Like this space is just being run what they need, right? You need
Ice
food, we
cream
give
for
you
dinner.
food. You need water, we give you water.
Yeah.
Like whatever, let's just do what's
Yeah.
needed, right? And in that small period of time, we had the most success in the 18 years I'd ever been there.
Yeah.
We had
Wow.
achieved so much for those young people because, like you said, all we're going back to is what do these young people need? And all they need is someone to care about them, somewhere safe to go, someone to listen, someone to value them, an outlet for whatever it is that they need, a place to connect. Like it's so simple. And I guess I get really frustrated. I get really fiery about it because I'm like, the solution is not, or when we look at social problems and we look at young people, right? So we go, we've got unemployed young people. Let's do resume writing workshops and let's do job readiness workshops. It's like, have we thought about why they're unemployed? Like, let's just take it 3 steps and understand that the homeless young person doesn't care about getting a job right now because they don't have a roof over their head, or the young person who's growing up in a family where there's DV every night and they're not sleeping every night. They're not getting up and going to school the next morning, So until we can start to think about what's actually happening for young people, we can't really solve those problems. And ticking the box at the other end and just doing these programs, like constant program, after, and then services, and then they go for 6 months and they stop. It doesn't work. You need consistency.
Yeah, and especially with kids, like you need like need boundaries and you need consistency. That's been
Yep.
my experience with kids. You need boundaries, and I won't ever claim to be the best parent in the world, but that's what I've learned over my time and years, is that you need boundaries and consistency. And I think one thing that really does shine through for me is, the 18 years of experience, like that is lived experience as far as I would be concerned. Like, you have lived experience of that space. It's different to other
Yeah.
people's lived experience. And that's the other thing that I'm trying to get across to a lot of people at the moment, is you do have lived experience. Your experience is lived experience, whoever it is, whether it's an academic, whether it's like, that's lived experience. Like, just
Yeah.
around how we use that language and terminology of, and we've gone into that foray of our lived experience. And I think you touched on it a little bit before. It's more for a lot of these kids, it's living experience. They're still in it, living it. And
Yeah.
to be re-traumatized and have to retell those stories, because sometimes that happens for me. It's like I go into spaces and, I'm an upwardly mobile, like I know what I'm doing. I've been trained, I've been taught, I've been somewhat educated. I still find it arduous at times to share my story in certain
Mm.
spaces. And that's really why I
Yeah.
don't work in a justice space anymore, because I just don't agree with it. Like, I just don't. Like, to
Yeah.
prop it up, to keep propping it up. Like, I've had people on my program where, we disagree. They go and work in prisons and do work in prisons. I don't do work in prisons anymore because I don't believe in it.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's the value, and understanding the difference, like, because we need difference, because if we all agree, that's the other thing that my friend says, is all we say to each other is, may we never agree, because if we're
Yeah.
agreeing,
Yeah.
like, there is no problem. There's no
Yeah.
frustration. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
But it's about being able to open your mind, I think. Like, we don't have to agree, but we can still have a conversation. We can still respectfully share perspectives. And, if we don't do that and we don't have, because I think a lot of the time people just shy away because it's, it can be confronting, and it can be conversations, that make people uncomfortable.
yeah,
And, even in this space, you talk about, like, people talk about like safety, or like people making me feel unsafe. It's like, are you really unsafe, or are you just uncomfortable?
yeah,
Is
yeah,
someone just, having a conversation that makes you feel really uncomfortable? And so you're not willing to sit in that discomfort to go, well, let's just have this conversation. And you're right about that living experience, right? Because I think even in that, like, we talk about lived experience, but young people are living it. There's still,
yeah,
like, trauma doesn't go away for a young person. They don't just wake up one day and go, oh, I'm not traumatized now, I can go tell my story. But when you look at that co-design, when you're actually doing that effectively, and you're sitting at the table with young people who have that living experience, you have to still work in a way that's safe for them as well, right? And you have to acknowledge, like, you can't write them off. And this happened in my experience as well. Like, young people, they're still going through stuff. So even though they might have been in a leadership position, they might get locked up next week, and then all of a sudden they're not around for the next 3 months. But you can't then write them off and be like, oh, well, you got locked up and now you can't be a leader anymore. And you just, you have to accommodate for those things. And I think this is the part of that co-design that people don't want to kind of unpack, and don't, they still want it to be clean. They still want it to be boxed. Like, come with your lived experience, but come in these parameters, and, like, don't let
yeah,
it go outside the lines, and don't let it get messy, and, don't get triggered, and don't, like, that's,
yeah.
again, it's not true co-design, because you're, like, trying to put it into a box.
Yeah, yeah. No, once again, Natalie, our time, I told you to go fast. Our time's coming to an end. Is there anything you want to tell us about what's coming up in your life? What's, like, work-wise, or anything you want to tell us about Spruik? Let people know that you're doing the work that you're doing. I really value and appreciate the work that you're doing. I think it's, you're leading the way in this space. And I know, and I feel lonely at times in the space. I can feel lonely, so I know how hard it can be. I haven't quite been doing it for 18 years, but I've been doing research for just a little bit longer than that. But yeah, is there anything you want to tell us about you've got coming up in your work that you're doing?
Yeah, I've got, like, a few exciting opportunities that are coming up working with various organizations. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see some really cool projects coming up. But the space that I'm really sitting in at the moment is taking this knowledge around youth practice, developing something around that to be able to share that with as many people as I can. So other people who are working with young people who want to start working in this space and want to be doing it more effectively, I'm really passionate about developing the systems and the structures and empowering other people, because at the end of the day, that's what community is. It's about giving the skills and the knowledge and the tools to the community to do it themselves. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. But yeah, stay posted on my LinkedIn. A lot of exciting opportunities, and always happy to share my knowledge, I suppose, and share what I've learnt, and any way that I can support. The other thing I'm doing that's super exciting, which I've loved, is I'm helping a few young people who have started their own charities. So I'm working with an amazing organisation called Young Prodigy. Two amazing young women have started this organisation, and that's to work with young people who've been impacted by parental incarceration. So again, it just,
Wow.
I love it, because it just shows the ability of young people to identify and go, there was never anything for us, and so we're going to do something ourselves. We're not going to wait for the system to come and save us. We're going to do this for ourselves. So yeah, that's been super exciting, and they've got some cool things coming up as well. So stay posted. It's YUNG Prodigy.
Thank you very much, Natalie, again for your time. Your link to your LinkedIn will be in the bottom of the profile, like this video and all that sort of stuff. So people will be able to find you there. It'll be posted on LinkedIn as well. Yeah, thank you for being the first person on I invited you on because, and yeah, I invited you on because I really see you as a valued expert in the youth justice and youth space. And thanks again for all the work that you do.
Thank you.